Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Brockton Bay Chronicles. My name's Keith. With me, as always, is my friend Andy. We're continuing on his first time reading of the massive web serial Worm by Wildbow. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing pretty good. The NBA playoffs aren't going the way I would like, but such is life. Luckily, we have this kind of wonderful literature to escape into and see how much worse things could be. So I guess we've got some new business. We've got a number of excellent comments and questions that we'll tackle. And Keith, I believe you have a special event coming up that's going to require some travel. So there may be an impact to our schedule.
Yes, my wife and I will be driving to the Pacific Northwest to see our youngest son graduate from veterinary school. And that'll take place sometime in mid-June. And as far as our recording schedule, Andy and I have been talking a little bit. It's definitely going to be affected. We're not sure to what extent, but we will try to minimize the disruption. So I just wanted to let everybody know that there will be a longer than average break in between a couple of episodes. But trust me when I say we're going to do what we can to keep things rolling right along. Andy, you also want to let everyone know what chapters we're covering this week?
Sure, yeah. We'll be reviewing Arc 15, Colony, chapters 3 to 5, and the second bonus interlude.
Boy, there was a heck of a discussion in the comment section this last episode regarding what went on with Amy and Victoria. And so we're going to touch base on several of those comments in addition to some additional feedback we got from a couple of new subscribers. So let's begin with that. First, we hear from Johannes E., who gives us a hearty welcome back. Thanks, Johannes. We're glad to be back and recording once again. And on to another question from Freak Circus. This pertains to that discussion of Amy, what Amy was doing with Victoria. And one of the things that Freak Circus points out was, quote, regarding Amy losing her way when fixing Victoria, the way I see it is that she was already emotionally distraught when she forced Victoria to love her. And then it got worse when she had to counter Crawler's venom, which melted Victoria's flesh and was self-propagating, end quote. That's one of the points that Freak Circus was making there. Also, we hear from a new contributor, James Goddard, who says, so glad this has started up again. On the topic of Amy, think of it like an artist. She has done healing, but might never have done something this large. She knows what Vicky should have looked like, but each attempt is just not right. So she makes another shoulder to compare, but that doesn't look right either. That's just a segment from what James was contributing there. On the same subject, we hear from Megafire7, and Megafire says, as uncomfortable as it may seem, you may want to think more closely on exactly what Amy was doing during her time with Victoria. Promises she made to certain people, what her breaks might have looked like. We hear from a new contributor, Wuxing, I hope that's correct, Wuxing Chrysalis. Well, just finished reading through Worm myself and had the luck to come across your podcast, which is a really great way to put thoughts in order. Really love having different perspectives on a great story. Well, Wuxing Chrysalis, we are very glad to have you along with us for the ride. Next comment we hear from Vale. And also this is on, once again, on the subject of Amy and Victoria. And I believe Vale, it's fair to say Vale has a similar look at the situation as does Megafire. Vale says, go back if you want to the conversation at Arcadia High between Jack and Amy, what his offer was and what her breaking point was. He says he and the Slaughterhouse Nine will leave if she agrees to certain things. It's only one of the worst things in the story, and I'm glad it is only referenced in tangents because it's so awful. Imagine the worst, then go from there as far as you can decide to go. And you probably still won't get there yet. And then finally, we hear once again from Wuxing Chrysalis. And this goes back to our review in Arc 7, referring to the discussion surrounding Taylor's leaving home. Definitely an interesting perspective on Taylor and her dad's relationship. While reading, we were instinctively on the side of Danny's in the wrong here. You don't corner your child to try to talk to them, to try to get them to talk to you. Sorry about that. But listening to your commentary, it made clear the fact that he was a dad trying to find a way to get through to his daughter. And being lost and not knowing what to do, went at it the worst possible way, especially considering Taylor's trauma about feeling trapped and constricted. If she hadn't had the Undersiders, sure, it might possibly have worked out. But I could foresee disastrous consequences apart from that. Ironically, I feel like they have more chance to repair the relationship someday than if Taylor had indeed been locked home for a while. I want to chime in on this last comment and question or statement from Wuxing Chrysalis on that Arc 6 review. If memory serves, I believe I was pretty hardcore in Danny's corner. You and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Andy. You comment on the fact that he was a single parent trying to deal with the situation as best he can. The point that Wuxing Chrysalis here makes about them being able to repair their relationship is an interesting one, and it's given me cause to given me pause to possibly rethink a few things. If she hadn't had the Undersiders to go to escape to, might she had just stayed home and maybe sunk into a depression and possibly even come out worse than being able to retreat at least into the arms of her friends. Something to think about. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. So I think one of the hardest things as a parent is that kind of the way you interact with your child and the strategies that work at one age, it seems like with the flip of a switch, all of a sudden don't work anymore. And you kind of have to retool or rethink things. So, for instance, when the child's really small, they need a lot of help and they want you to pick them up and they want you to set them on, the chair or whatever. But then as they start to get a little autonomy, they get mad when you pick them up. They're like, let me
Right.
do it. And even to the point of it's like, no, I know I could have done that. Put me back where I was and I'll show you. And you're like, what? But that's how they learn. And so as an adult, you have to keep kind of shifting how you look at things. And so, and as we said, we talked about it a lot at the time, having two parents in the picture really helps you to kind of keep each other and balance each other out. And, if one is feeling a little bit like they're on the spot, the other one can kind of tug them on the sleeve and say, all right, it's not that big a deal,
Right.
and let's think about this, let's sleep on it or whatever. And so, yeah, I agree with Chrysalis here, where he is stipulating that when you kind of lock somebody in, it's the old, if you love someone, set them free kind of thing. It's, you've got to, especially somebody that age, you got to let them go and try it and hope that you raise them right, if you will, and that they will realize, okay, this is bad or this isn't the way I thought it was, and then they'll come around. But yeah, it's a tough call either way. So yeah, Taylor could have stayed there, and the old phrase that someone told me, convince a person against their will, they're of the same opinion still. So, you can force things, and especially if there's a power dynamic, but that doesn't mean you're changing their mind. And without a person's mind being changed, then they're either going to be sad or mad. And that neither of those are good things for a relationship. So it's a tough spot there. And I really like Chrysalis's perspective on it.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to my first read through to go a little further on this, and as I said, I was really in Danny's corner. And like, I know you're trying to do the best you can here, Taylor. You got to cut him a little bit of slack here. But after going through this story once and doing this project with you, and then this commentary here, I think that I'm glad that Taylor did have some place to retreat to.
Hmm.
As much as I didn't like the idea of her leaving home, it turns out that at least she's got a friend. I mean, this friend, Tattletale's a criminal, but she's got a friend, a friendly place to retreat to, and someone else who also understands the perils of being a parahuman. See, Danny has no idea what's going on with his daughter.
Great point. Yeah.
She's keeping so much from him at that point. So she's, if you recall the scene where she stooped down in the kitchen trying to deal with her dad, trying to keep her power at bay.
Hmm.
And then finally it came to the point of, I just got to get out. I got to get out. Well, at least she had Lisa there, who was not, she wasn't going to go out, sleep in a park or something like that. So really appreciate this comment from you, Chrysalis. Thanks for that. Please continue to contribute. Back to the want of Amy and Vicky and the conversation Amy had with Jack at Arcadia High. You want to dive into that rather large that large subject?
Sure. And I think that's a great place to start, because there were some interesting things there that I reminded myself going back and reading it. And, one is that they mention that the flesh sarcophagus or whatever, that inside of there, Victoria is largely intact, it seems. There's a scene where it says the lid opens and Skitter is able to see a girl floating in a clear sack of fluid.
Oh, that's right.
And, and so it seems like she's in pretty good shape right there. Now, obviously, she's not 100%, or she would be running around or flying around, not, having this weird thing, but she's not a blob with a bunch of shoulders and legs and stuff. So something happens in between there. But to go with the comments that Vale made, I'm not sure where he's going with this, but it's kind of I think it hinges on the Jack saying, just say that you'll cut loose for a minute. Just say that you'll take the safety measures off,
right?
Take the brakes off, and you'll just cut loose. And so for someone who is lonely, someone who longs for family and has this power, I could see where she could become like the world's biggest puppeteer, basically. She could turn everyone into looking the way she wanted, doing what she wanted, loving her, worshiping her, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been done in a number of different stories. The one that occurs to me is Lord of Light, which is a classic story by Roger Zelazny, where people colonize a planet. Some people wake up first to kind of set it up, and they decide that they're going to kind of reprogram everybody in cold sleep to believe that the people that woke up first are the gods of the world and everybody else has to serve them. But the fun of that wears off pretty quick. Certain people of the quote unquote God class decide we've got to let these people know that they're not less than us, that we're all the same, and we're just keeping things from them. And so, I mean, as awful as it seems that Amy would go way off the deep end like that, I guess what I think is more along the lines of what the other two commenters said, and that is what I call the gray egg theory. So if I can take you back to painting Easter eggs when you were a kid,
yeah,
I was always the one that wanted to make mine the most vibrant and have the most different colors. And the danger was if you pushed it too far, all the colors blurred together and you ended up with a gray egg.
right.
And it had no features. It didn't look good at all. And so, to the one commenter's point, Amy was used to fixing things. And so you have basically all the stuff there, and like on a broken arm, you can see it should all look like the bone looks over here, but here it's broken or it's crushed.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can build from the scaffolding, if you will. So in my line of work and from your line of work, you have something that has a flaw, but most of it's there.
Right.
So you're able to just kind of compare, this is what it should look like. I'll make the flawed part look correct. And so, and that works 99% of the time. And I think that's largely what Amy's done. But in this case, we have, as they said, not only Amy's or Victoria's genetic material, but genetic material from other creatures, genetic material from the venom. We also have the microbes in the mix. And so, and then I think what Megafire is getting at is that maybe Amy decided to cut loose a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she decided to, all right, you guys said you'll leave, I'll do it. And she tries it on Victoria and things go horribly wrong. And then she feels bad. And on top of all the other trauma, she just, loses her way and it turns into a, puddle of person.
Yeah.
But I don't know. How does that sound to you?
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. And this was the sort of thing that I would have gone to Tony with the question, but I wanted to try to find my way and understand the points that Megafire and Vale were trying to bring up. Taking into consideration what you're saying, I would add to, and maybe this, I don't know if this would be adding anything, her emotional state. Once she cut loose, man, I don't know. And I'm probably not going to make much sense here. I just know that Amy's emotional state, her feelings for Victoria, the raw emotional deal she got from her adopted mother, the being pursued by the nine and trying to be recruited, that could not have helped her find her way back, if you will, after she did whatever she was going to do to Victoria, then trying to restore her to what should have been her normal self. The emotional damage that she was suffering from could not have helped that situation at all. If that helps the conversation at all.
Yeah, no, I think those are great points. And, Amy really struggled, as I think all of us do whenever we see these kind of things. Like I was also thinking of Jessica Jones, the series that was on Netflix, I think, and how she was controlled by that guy and manipulated. And I think anyone who has the power to do that, to kind of pull the wool over somebody's eyes, or in this case, worse, manipulate their brain at a level that they kind of don't even know that's there, is going to feel dirty about it, and feel extreme guilt. And, maybe Amy did the equivalent of like, all right, I don't want to ever know how to get into that safe again because it's got, say you're a drug addict, it's got drugs in it, and I don't ever want to use them again. And so I'm going to reset the combo with my eyes closed. So I don't even know how to get it back open again.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe Amy just started wildly flailing around with Victoria, knowing that I don't want her to ever possibly be what I remember again, because I would be tempted to.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know. I'm just spitballing there.
Yeah. Interesting thought. Well, thanks, folks. It was good to see the discussion taking place in the comment section over on the YouTube channel. This is part of the reason we're doing this little project. It'd be awfully boring just for Andy and I to be spitballing ideas back and forth at each other. This is why we really appreciate it whenever folks chime in and offer up questions or interesting ideas on the story. So Thanks. And let's move on to our review.
And I think Tony thanks you too, I think, because otherwise we'd be plaguing the heck out of him, you know. Hey, come over and play with us, Tony. Let's talk. So
Oh yeah, that's true too. That's true too. So let's move on into our review for this episode. We are picking up with Arc 15, Chapter 3. Taylor, Tattletale, Regent, and Imp have just taken down the remnants of the skinhead group. Among them is Othala, Victor, Knight, and Fog. And they're standing over them, and Tattletale says to them, hey, to use a cliche, you can do this the easy way or the hard way. And as we found out at the end of the previous chapter, Taylor didn't realize that they were planning on taking Victor as a hostage. The reasoning, I guess you could say, is sound long term, the goal that Tattletale had, but Skitter wasn't in favor of it. She got kind of indignant. That comes a little bit later in the chapter, but in the early part of this, they are going to quote unquote tax these people for being in their area, and they were going to take Victor as a hostage and use his skills, and they were going to take some of the loot that these people have pilfered from around the area. What did you think of this situation? We've got Victor, this skill vampire. We've got Othala, this person with pretty unique power, and they successfully took down Knight and Fog. Tattletale does some pretty good negotiating, playing mind games with Victor and Othala.
I think the team did really well overall, and they're really coming into their own. It's totally understandable. You know, they just have fought off the Slaughterhouse Nine, made it through the meat grinder, literally. So they're feeling much more confident, and that I think that comes across in their strategy and their execution. But I'm with Skitter on this. You know, it's kind of like, you know, like if in World War II or some conflict, you knew the person who was the brains behind the ultimate weapon, then you know you try to capture that person and take them out of the equation. You know, so they take care of Shatterbird, they control her. You know, that's one piece off the table that they don't have to worry about. But you know, as often happens with generals or battle plans, it's like, hey, that worked last time, let's try it again with somebody else. And it's kind of like, well, wait a minute, we're not, you know, this was kind of like a one-off thing here, right? We're not in the business of kidnapping people and torturing them, right? Or holding them hostage. So I get where Skitter's coming from, and it's unfortunate that the dynamics are such that, you know, the distrust is there. So rather than work through or debate on the different stuff, that people are making plans kind of behind Skitter's back and then springing it on her. As we see, you know, further on in the arc, Skitter seems open to discussing things.
Yeah.
You know, why didn't the discussion happen ahead of time? But everybody's got their stuff, their agenda, and trying to get stuff done, and they're all feeling kind of under the gun time wise. So sometimes people cut corners.
Yeah. I can't remember. I hope I'm not being repetitive. I can't remember if we brought up Skitter's displeasure with Regent's treatment of Shatterbird and how she was not happy with him, and the point he came back with about keeping Shatterbird emotionally drained so that she couldn't successfully fight off his control when she was at a distance from him. I bring that up as a lead into this discussion about Taylor being upset, it's Skitter being upset with Tattletale on about the capture of Victor. Tattletale says in her defense that she had no idea that Skitter had such qualms about what they were doing, and that she would have would have let her know, would have broached the subject with her, had she known she had such problems about it. Do you take Tattletale at face value there?
No. uh, well, I mean, Tattletale's power is to kind of understand how people are being able to ferret out how people are processing, how they're feeling, how they're thinking. And so my guess is that she had a pretty good idea that Skitter had qualms about it, but she also knew or figured out it would be easier to ask forgiveness than ask permission. You
I
know,
was just about to say that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so and she probably ferreted out that Skitter would have a kind of an emotionally negative reaction, and but that she would come around. And so it's kind of like, do I do the debate first
Mm.
and risk missing the opportunity to capture people, and then maybe we capture them and Skitter's okay with it because we debated first, or do we capture them because we have the opportunity now and then Skitter gets mad, but she's going to be okay with the debate anyway, but we can do that while the person's on ice and we've already taken care of the business. So
Wow. So
I'm
Tattletale remains a step ahead of Skitter, and, and Skitter's fooling herself afterwards, saying, "Well, okay, just so long as we talk about it next time," and really and really believes what Tattletale is selling her. Is that what you're saying here?
yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, the same thing happens a lot with us in real life, like when you got a group of people trying to figure out where to go for lunch,
Mm-hmm.
there's always going to be that, I'm not sure, I'm not and then you end up and you shoot like half your lunch hour trying to decide where to go, and you have to go to the nearest place because you don't have enough time anymore. So finally, usually somebody's like, hey, I'm going here, you guys want to go? And everybody's like, and then they kind of grumble about it in the car, and they get there, everybody finds something to eat, you have fun, you get back to work. So
Right.
it, it's kind of exactly what the other person says. We can do that the easy way or the hard way. And so it's like, all right, you'll be unhappy for a bit, but it'll all work out then. So we're just going to go ahead and do it.
Let's compare. Well, she wasn't trying to extract information. What does it say about Skitter at this moment in her journey to villainy, or further into villainy? What does it say about her using those Black Widows to keep Victor quiet while Tattletale was out of the room, so to speak?
And that was interesting. It was almost like, I mean, Tattletale was definitely taking, or I'm sorry, Skitter was taking kind of a passive aggressive approach. It was, I'm pissed off, but I don't want the team to look bad, so I'll go along with it. It's like, oh, but here's a way I could go along with it and still be kind of a butthead. So I'll put Black Widows on people, and then that'll that'll kind of signal to everybody that I'm not real happy. So that's what I got out of that.
Yeah, passive aggressive. I hadn't considered that, but I think that makes sense. She glared upon occasion at Tattletale prior to the team leaving. So Tattletale knew, I'm sure, that Skitter was unhappy with the situation as it was. Pretty creative way they kept Night from turning ugly on them, making sure that one of them was watching her at all times, not blinking or having their eyes closed at the same time in order to prevent her from either regenerating fully or turning ugly and monstrous.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And that's one of those things that like with like role playing games or video games or comic book stuff, Superman has his kryptonite, right? So if you
Right.
can find that one thing, it seems obvious once you figure it out, but before you figure it out, it's like, holy crap, how are we going to stop this person?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, now that they found the chink in the armor, it's like, oh, well, this isn't that bad. And then of course, Imp later on mentions that I was doing it all myself. I had to run to catch up to y'all. So, but yeah, that's cool.
Moving a little further into the chapter, let's talk about Skitter calling out, or pardon me, Regent calling out Skitter on her double standard about things. The situation with the team doing things, and Skitter always being the one to say, hey, hold on a second, I got scruples here. You guys need to bend to my will. And Regent using her infiltration of the team, or reminding her of that flaw in her character, to say, hey, I don't think he was being malicious so much as just keeping it 100 and saying, look, you're not holier than thou here. Your hands aren't clean, and I think you should look at the situation through this lens. Don't forget how you came to this team.
That's kind of a tough one. Yeah, it's so pastor at a church I used to go to said that a common comment he got from non-believers was like, well, all you Christians are hypocrites. And his response was always, there's always room for one more. At a certain level, we're all hypocritical. It's hard for anyone to be totally cut and dried.
Mm-hmm.
There's times where we do things that 99 times out of 100 we wouldn't do, just for whatever reason. I can think of situations that were kind of a crisis where it's like, yeah, all right, I don't like this, but a phrase I used in the past was like, well, if I'm drowning in quicksand and the only thing you extend to me is a snake, I'm going to grab the snake. I mean, yeah. I'll take my chances. It's not optimal, but what choice do I have? So, and I feel like Skitter, in the other instances where Regent was controlling people, it was kind of that crisis type situation, and she's not really seeing a crisis here. And so it seems more like you guys are just taking the easy way. But Regent has a point too, that Skitter at one point does seem like she wants to be squeaky clean, and at the other time she's like, oh no, I got to cut this guy's eyes out, or
yeah.
So
it's important to the story, you think, that Wildbow uses Regent as a vehicle to remind us of Skitter's character flaws?
Yeah, I mean, Regent seems like the most loosely ethical or unethical person around. He'll just do, he knows he's done bad things, but it's like, yeah, I did it. And then he knows he's done some good stuff, but I don't take credit for it. The world's going to end in 2 years, so who cares anyway? So,
yeah,
he's very just slushy, I guess. But, I think character is not so much that you never fail to live up to your principles. It's just that you try to then get back on track. You get up and dust yourself off. And so I think, Wildbow might be trying to point out that Skitter, like all of us, has some hypocritical aspects. But, I still feel like Skitter's one of the best in the group at acknowledging, yeah, I stepped off the path there. Now it's time to get back on the path.
I agree.
And I admire her for that.
Yeah.
But I tend to be that way too. I mean, I was in a group last night defending a group, as we're going through a study, and it's like, all right, I know this is my thing. Like, I'm always the one that brings this up, but everybody's like, yeah, you're right. So, so it's hard being that person though. It's
sometimes you got to be that way.
Toe the line. Yeah. I'm sure you ran into that in coaching, right? There's lots of things you can do in coaching that are, all right, that's not optimal, especially with kids, right? I mean, we all were in sports, and there's that kid that's like, oh yeah, no, you can do that at your age, and everybody's like, no, that's not healthy. His bones aren't knit all the way, right? His muscles can't handle it, and then sure enough, the kid flames out and might have permanent injury, and it's like, well, was it worth winning that little league game at age 12 in the playoffs?
That's always a tough one to line to keep in front of you and to be aware of. The health of the kid is more important than the victory, and yeah, good coaches, especially at youth level, keep that in mind. So, moving on toward the end of the chapter, we do come up with Imp meeting and talking with Skitter. Now, this is after Tattletale and Regent have carted Victor off to Coyle's place, and Imp comes up to Skitter and has a favor to ask of her. She does relay to Skitter how she had stayed behind to keep an eye on Knight and was winking instead of blinking, so she didn't lose sight of her. Very smart, Aisha. Very, very cool. She asked Skitter for a favor. I didn't realize what the favor was when I first read it, and when we move on into the upcoming interlude, that's when I began to understand what I think were the favor that she was asking of Skitter. So let's move on into the second bonus interlude for chapter 15. And we are getting a view from Brian's point of view. Geez, the big guy is really struggling. Never mind the issue with his powers and having had this second trigger event. I think Wildbow more than successfully just conveys to us the mental anguish of someone who had just been tortured severely.
Yeah. And I think, and there are different shows and stories have portrayed this, but I think it's kind of a common theme that the people who survive the horrible torture are the ones who are just like trapped in that. Unless somebody pulls them out of it. It's just this endless loop. You keep playing out that tape or aspects of it, and it's just, yeah, you just can't escape it. It's just there all the time. And so I agree, Wildbow really captures that. Yeah, you really feel for Brian that, on the one hand, it's like, hey, you got these new powers, and it's like, well, yeah, but it's not worth it.
Yeah, not worth the cost.
Yeah, I wish I was back the old way.
Yeah. Now, if you take the PTSD from that torture, and now you layer on top of that the second trigger event and trying to come to terms with what these powers are doing to him, that's another level of complexity to this whole situation. I liked the humanizing, the depth we get from Aisha here. I mean, she's an imperfect little sister. We are pretty sure she's got some kind of ADHD or something from possibly being exposed in utero to bad things due to her mother. But as best she can, she's showing some genuine concern for her brother.
And that's really neat to see. And I think it's a couple of different factors. One is that growing up in the situation she was in, she didn't really trust anybody, not to the extent of like bitch, but definitely feeling like she couldn't count on anyone. And now going through this stuff with the Undersider, she started to see, all right, well, they're not perfect and there's no guarantees, but they're definitely seem to be willing to do anything they can to make things work out. They're definitely got my back. So I think that realization has sunk in. And also she's realized that this whole parahuman gig isn't as easy as she thought it was. It's not all, peaches and cream. So, right. She went through that whole thing trying to be the hero or the heroine with the, figuring out where the Slaughterhouse 9 was and getting everything done. And then that all went sour really fast. So I think she's realizing that, all right, if I'm feeling this bad about this stuff, imagine how bad my brother's feeling. So yeah, she's starting to go beyond just thinking about herself, and she's thinking more about others. To be fair, nobody else was thinking about her. Well, Brian was, but it was hard for her to see that. So she did have to only think about herself. It was a survival trait, but now she's starting to come out of that shell, and that's good.
Yeah, raising her head a little bit and looking beyond the next 5 minutes and looking at the people around her. This moment that Wildbow has Brian recall that situation with Bonesaw, this quote here was real chilling, where he's recalling her words, and it says, "Incision here, saw through the breastbone, and there we go. You're cooperating so nicely. Not that you have much of a choice. Oh, here, this part is always cool." And then she, in his mind's eye, she's relaying the what happens when you cut open a person's chest, and Brian is throughout this interlude, he's having these flashes, and it's tense, and you're wondering, is he going to snap? He's struggling so hard. He doesn't know how to respond properly to the attention that Aisha is showing him. He keeps seeing these flashes of this surgical nut, and he's in a bad way.
Right. He knows that his main driver of trying to protect his sister is kind of disabled right now. He barely seems able to handle himself, and he's really scared of what might happen. And then, Aisha, for as much as you said, she's kind of lifting up her head and looking around and trying to be there for other people, she's really new at it.
Yeah.
So at one point she says, I'm going to feel pretty terrible if I come back and you're a bloody mess. And then that immediately triggers Gru, and he's back in that place, and Taylor's seeing him, and is, he's seeing her reaction to what he is. And so he winces, and then Aisha's like, oh man. And so Aisha probably feels like, man, I'm walking on eggshells here. Brian is like, I can't do what I want to do, and I don't know what's going to happen. And so it looks like he might not make it out of this.
Yeah.
He survived it physically, but emotionally or mentally, he's not gonna make it through.
As we alluded to earlier, it turns out that Aisha had asked Taylor for help in dealing with Brian. She knew enough to recognize, yeah, this girl has something, has emotions for my brother. Perhaps she can help him through this dark tunnel. Imp is trying to go out on patrol. She's like, hey, you stay here. Don't do anything. Don't be beating up on this heavy bag anymore and continuing hurting yourself. You stay here. She insisted on, made the effort to try to get him to stay so that he would not miss Taylor's arrival. And it was kind of neat how Taylor used the moth to catch his attention. And he made an interesting observation about her as he saw her approaching, and how she would walk down the street, probably using her swarm sense to check for oncoming traffic or any potential threats, and just kind of a unexpectedly carefree look of air about her as he approached. And that was something that she should probably watch out for. One of a more observant one of their enemies might catch on to the fact that she never looks around in traffic or anything like that when she's walking, because she has no need to.
That was a neat little scene, definitely. And it reminded me of what you see in some like Jet Li type movies or whatever, where someone's trying, someone says, hey, I know you, you're that super master martial arts guy. They're like, no, I'm not, and then they bump something off the table, or they throw something at the guy, and the guy, without looking, catches it.
Right.
And he's like, oh, I gave myself away. But yeah, it's definitely, especially with the devastation in the area and all the junk going on, you would think, any normal person would be walking with their head on a swivel.
Right.
And here she is, just like, well, I'm not even going to bother to look. She's got something going on there. So yeah, especially not in her costume. She should be really careful about that. But yeah, again, Aisha, surprised us here, where she's kind of gone from the spiteful little sister who automatically, or younger sibling who automatically rejects every advance on their older sibling, and just always assumes the worst to saying, well, I think maybe she can help, because Taylor had expressed that she's had feelings and Aisha knew that, but Aisha has seen that Taylor hasn't done anything to try to push that, or try to make things, force things to happen.
Right.
And so Aisha might have concluded, well, maybe Taylor has got Brian's best interest at heart. Maybe he wants what's best for her. She wants what's best for him. So let's give her a chance to try to help.
At one point prior to Taylor's arrival, Brian's looking over the maps of their territory. Turns out that they've done quite a bit of house cleaning with regards to their enemies who have been either encroaching on their area or ones they've needed to root out. Aisha has been going out with Regent to deal with the locals, being rather effective about it, and that compounds the emotional distress and drain that Brian is feeling, because he doesn't feel like he's contributing or pulling his weight as far as the team goes. And it's understandable that he feels this way. He's the big brother. He's supposed to be leading the team. At one point, he's like, I don't even know what I'm doing here anymore. So it was good to have these people. He's got an effective team. I mean, Aisha, Tattletale, Taylor, they care about his emotional state, and they want him to be well. I mean, Regent and Rachel, that's not their wheelhouse.
Right.
But anyway, Taylor gets there and offers to cook dinner for him as a way to try to help him, relax and get something in him to try to rebuild up his, make him feel a little better having a home cooked meal. And the two of them bond. I think we see them reaching to a place that we kind of figured they'd get to eventually. Difficult circumstances. I mean, him coming off his second trigger, trying to deal with all this, but her being the rock that he didn't think this particular person that she would be, but she's the rock that he needed at this moment.
This was a particularly interesting scene, I thought, because we have the insight into how Brian is doing, and it seems like he's on a tightrope suspended above a pit full of spikes and sharks. But when Taylor offers to let him kind of experiment a little bit, she's not aware of how close he is to the edge, and he kind of agrees to it. So it's interesting, there's some part of him that has kind of recognized her rock-like qualities, if you will. He feels like she can handle it, and he welcomes the opportunity to try to grapple with what's going on with him. And Taylor's just, willing to help. And I'm guessing that her analytical abilities have assessed the situation and figured that it's probably okay, that the worst case scenario isn't that bad. And so yeah, this was really neat. And I was kind of surprised that it worked out this way. In retrospect, it makes sense. And Taylor, had kind of demonstrated like her costumes earlier that way, hey, try to hit me with a knife, but this is taking it to a whole new level, and it works out pretty well.
Let's see if I can put you in a position to make some predictions. First question, do you think Ryan will successfully find his way through this dark patch coming out of the second trigger? Do you think he'll be successful finding his way out of that?
Conditionally. So my very bold, very out on a limb prediction here is that he will slowly get better and will think he's in great shape, but then he will end up borrowing somebody's power that affects him in a way he didn't expect and will just shatter him.
Okay. All right. Cool. That's question one. And this question two leads a little bit into the next chapter, chapter four. How successful do you think a relationship between Taylor, a genuine boyfriend girlfriend relationship between Brian and Taylor will be? Will it? Do they have a chance?
I again, I think it will go, it will continue to get better. Sure, there'll be bumps in the road. They're both kind of overly protective, and I think there'll be a lot of struggles with trying to get to the point where they can trust that the other person is not going to do something stupid,
Mm-hmm.
because not only they're thinking of themselves, but they're thinking of the other person, and that they don't want to abandon them through, death or dismemberment, so to speak. But I think, just like, there's those movies where somebody loves a drug addict, or somebody loves an alcoholic, and things go well for a while, and then there's that point where something happens, and the addict or the alcoholic is crushed by their disease, and then the relationship is shattered as well. So I'm guessing there'll be a honeymoon period, but then there'll be a very tragic end to it.
All right. We will file those away for a later time and pull them out and see. We'll see how close you were to getting those. So let's move on into chapter four. And I part of the reason I brought that question up to you was it's the next morning, and Taylor is thinking to herself the about the perils of being in a relationship with another parahuman, and she recounts relationships that she's aware of between capes that have just not worked out or were extremely dysfunctional. Talking about Night and Fog, Victor and Othala, Brandish Flashbang, and even Gallant and Glory Girl, and how there's not a great track record for parahuman relationships there. But for Taylor in this moment, she's thinking maybe it's just enough to be here cuddling up with this guy that I've had these feelings for all this time.
I think it's amazing how, in the grand scheme of things, the city is about to be condemned. They just fought off the most horrible parahumans around, and they survived. And rather than focusing on all they could be grateful for, that they're there, that they're cuddling, that some progress was made, that people seem to be getting along better, it's like, well, I want more. And it's totally human nature, and especially with Taylor's skills, she's trying to figure things out and trying to strategize, I'm sure, and not realizing that trying to manage a relationship like you would manage a task at work is not healthy or possible, really.
Mm-hmm.
But she's, we also, or it's easy for me to lose track of her being just a teenager. And I think about how messed up my ideas of relationships were at that age, and how easy it was to go from, oh, this is the best moment ever, to, oh, why wasn't it more? This is horrible. And oh, I have morning breath. I'm so embarrassed. This is the worst thing that could ever happen. It's like,
Sure.
no, not even close. It could be a
No.
lot worse. But, things loom so large at that age. And, when you haven't been in those kind of things before, been through relationships. But yeah, I mean, we see it in our world too, with like famous athletes or celebrities, and how often it's really hard for them to make relationships last,
Right.
because their lives are so much different than regular people, and even regular people struggle with relationships. But yeah, it's just funny how Taylor is like, instead of just savoring the moment,
Mm-hmm.
as is typical of people that age, it's always like, oh, it could have been this,
Right.
and why did I just sleep?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's as far as we know, this is possibly her first genuine relationship, and we will have to see where things go as they get up and get their morning started. Turns out that Aisha's come back at some point during the night. Probably used her power to stealthily get back in the headquarters without disturbing the two of them. She and Taylor have a moment in the kitchen. Aisha admits, "Hey, look, much as I want to, I can't help him. I'm hoping you can, but if you mess this up, if you hurt him, you're gonna be sorry you ever met him." And then she goes into detail about how she has been chasing. She uses her powers to encourage people to leave their territory, so to speak.
Yeah, typical little sister response, or sibling in general. We're all protective of our siblings.
Sure.
I think what Aisha fails to grasp is that Skitter isn't just some run-of-the-mill flunky that would get run out of town. I mean,
That's true.
if Aisha gets mad and decides that Skitter is messed up somehow, I think Aisha's going to come out on the bad end of that popsicle stick. I think Skitter would put her down, because if I were Skitter and I was worried that Aisha would start doing stuff, that I would do all the things that she did with like Mannequin. I mean, I'd rig up all sorts of stuff, and there'd be all sorts of warning systems and everything. And yeah, I would think Skitter would see Imp coming, even without quote unquote seeing her coming, and be able to mitigate anything Imp could do. But Imp doesn't realize that. She's just being the protective little sister.
That would be interesting to see. But we don't find out right then. It turns out that Coyle is wanting a meeting of the team. Taylor gets a text from Lisa, and it's like, "Hey, gather up Brian and Imp and head on over to Coyle's base. We need to gather up and see how things are with Victor, see if Gru can gather anything from him." And so they do just that. After having breakfast, they head on over to Coyle's base, which is come to life, and they seem to have gotten everything in place. It's set up with barracks and an armory and other things. They've got the vault, of course, where Noelle is. And one of the things that Skitter sees upon their arrival is Tattletale talking with the travelers and Coyle. And they're over by the vault where Noelle is. And not a whole lot of happy faces going on there. Tattletale is unable to share what's going on, but something's up. You want to speculate?
Yeah, I'm not sure on this one. I'm guessing that.
I mean, we haven't, to be fair to you, we haven't been given a whole bunch of information. We just know that the travelers have asked Coyle for something pertaining to Noelle and another problem of theirs.
Right. And then skipping ahead, when Skitter and Ballistic are interacting, Ballistic kind of lets it slip that Tattletale is trying to help them or something. So I'm guessing that it's something around that the travelers are pressing her for information, and Tattletale is, I'm going to say, acting in good faith and trying to help, but is stymied somehow. Either Coyle hasn't given her enough information to really help her, or has put constraints on her, because he likes the setup the way it is, right? He's kind of made all these deals. It's kind of like in the NFL when an older quarterback gets incentive clauses in his contract to switch teams, and then at the end of the year, the team benches him so that the incentives can't be triggered. They actively prevent him from trying to complete enough passes or throwing enough touchdowns or whatever. And it's because they don't want to pay the extra money.
Yeah.
So, Coyle doesn't want to follow through on these deals and have people leave or lose assets. And so I wouldn't put it past him for a minute that he's hamstrung Tattletale, or talked out of both sides of his neck, one to the travelers and one to Tattletale, and they think they're talking about the same thing, but they're not. So I'm guessing it's some kind of interaction where the travelers are wanting something, Tattletale can't give them what they want, and they can't give her what she needs to try to give them what they want. So everybody's kind of frustrated, but that's just my speculation.
Yeah. So the two sets of teams plus their benefactor, Coil, they have a meeting. Travelers on one side of the table, the undersiders on the other, and Coil asks for a status report from everyone regarding their territories. Have they kicked out the rogue elements in their territories? The conditions, things like that. And they kind of go around the table. Some are doing better than others, and if he was handing out gold stars, I would suspect that Skitter would get one.
Yeah, she's definitely the overachiever among the group. And it makes sense. I mean, of all the people, she's kind of got the best powers for surveillance, logistics, organization, that kind of thing, trying to repair infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the other people have more either spying or intelligence type stuff or flat out intimidation stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And while those things are great in a fight or in certain conflict, they're not necessarily good at reestablishing infrastructure. That's not going to be the strong suit of somebody who can, shoot beams out of his eyes, or a woman who can, through telepathy, lift giant chunks of stuff and throw it around. I mean, that might be a little helpful, but it's not going to repair the plumbing. It's not going to get the power going again. So yeah, Skitter's excelling at this particular task, and she's motivated to do that. But Coil, there's lots of ways to try to help cross-team collaboration. And Coil goes about it in the way that's most likely to cause friction. It seems like, wow, you're ballistic. You're kind of sucking at this. And Skitter, look how great she is. Skitter,
Yeah.
help out that poor sap, and it's like, well, wait a minute. Nobody's gonna that's never gonna come across very good. It's just Coil being Coil.
Yeah. So after going around the table, piggyback off what you were saying, the point about ballistic, Skitter wants to go with him to check out his territory. Ballistic is going to go make a run at kicking out Parian, who is in Dolltown, holed up in Dolltown with the remaining members of her family. And he's like, hey, I got to kick her out. I'm going to go try to recruit that former merchant parahuman Scrub. And Skitter's like, hey, you mind if I go? I want to kind of see what their area looks like and maybe get some ideas. Ballistic isn't happy about that. Before they depart, after the meeting breaks up, Skitter and Tattletale talk. And Tattletale's like, look, I'm pretty sure Coil's about done with you and is probably going to have you killed. Yeah, that's one heck of a bombshell to drop on Skitter's head.
No doubt. So yeah, there was that thing where they're supposed to travel with the mayor to Washington and try to strong arm him or convince him in some way to make sure that Brockton Bay isn't condemned. So it looks like the plan is that some mishap is going to happen to Skitter during that time. Looking at it from the cold, logical side of Coil, it's like, well, Taylor's pretty much done with her area and it's in good shape. I'm ready to move in there and set up shop. So I don't really need her there anymore. Yeah, if I can get rid of her, then I don't have to get rid of Dinah either. So win-win for me.
I'm trying to think if this is a good comparison. As much as Taylor was naive back in the early arcs when she was talking with Arms Master, as much as she was naive with the whole undercover thing, maybe she was also naive in thinking that she ever had a chance of convincing Coil to give up a precog for a girl who controlled bugs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she was. And, in her defense, she's 16 or 17. And so naivete kind of comes with the territory. And it's very hard for any of us to put ourselves fully in somebody else's shoes and try to see from their perspective.
Yeah.
And so Coyle's thinking, yeah, I'm keeping Dinah if there's any way for me to do it. And oh, well, yeah, this is not a savory way, but it'll work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Skitter. As we move on into chapter 5, which is the last chapter we're going to cover this episode, we get a quick look at Regent as he's controlling Victor, and they go through that scene where they have Gru shroud Victor in his darkness to try to see what he can glean from him, and he picks up a language or two. He also Regent moves Victor through some martial arts forms, and Gru kind of picks some of that up. And the question then becomes whether or not how much of that will stick with Gru. Will it become permanent? Which is an interesting thought, interesting question on whether or not, where we know Victor is a skill vampire, he would keep something permanently. Will Gru? That's an interesting question. We'll have to see going forward. Tattletale goes to see Skitter off before she heads out with Ballistic. Skitter's got a task, or two tasks: stay alive and try to see if she can turn Ballistic into a spy for the Undersiders. I think it's safe to say that Skitter is not real great at stealthy inquiries to people.
Yeah. Well, again, I keep bringing this up, but she is only 17. So generally, reading people is something that you either are born with or it's something that comes with a lot of experience. And so Skitter's definitely learned a lot having to deal with the folks from the Undersiders and the other people she's come in contact with. Bitch especially has been a tough nut to crack, but she's only got a few tools in that toolbox, and Ballistic has some stuff going on with him that she's not aware of. And if you don't know somebody's motivation, it can be really hard to know their perspective and where they're coming from. And so, in the previous chapter, Ballistic didn't even bother to name people. He's just like, oh yeah, that para and that para, and I'll do this. And then they're like, well, if you would name him, he's like, well, I'm not all geeky about it like you are.
Yeah.
And it's not so much, I don't think, that he's not geeky about it. It's just that he's not invested in this at all. And we see that a little bit in this chapter, where it's a means to an end, that they're helping Coyle out, but he's becoming more and more convinced that Coyle's not going to give him what they want. And he's also still bitter about the fact that they're even in this position in the first place.
Yeah, he's blaming Trickster.
For sure, yeah. And even if there's not somebody to blame, if it's just blind fate or whatever, if you're in a situation where you're unhappy about it and somebody gives you a way out, then that still doesn't mean you're going to be all happy about it. You're like, well, yeah, I'll do this because I want to get out of it, but I'm still not, it's like back to the snake and the quicksand. It's like, all right, it's not what I want to do, but it's all I got. So, but I'm not going to, don't expect me to laugh and smile about it.
Right. Part of the conversation prior to Skitter taking off with Ballistic, part of the conversation with Tattletale involves the possibility of Skitter replacing Gru as team leader, at least out on the field. What do you think of that? Was that something you would have foreseen taking place, even just the conversation about it?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised by this one. Skitter is a great field general, and even though she isn't 100% success rate, I mean, who is?
Yeah.
And it's oftentimes not the most powerful person in the group that needs to lead the group. You need kind of the overwatch. You need the big picture. There's the tactics and strategy, right? So if you're not good at the tactics of hand-to-hand fighting, then you use a strategy that makes sure you don't get into that situation.
Yeah.
But if you're good at it, then you just use that tactic over and over again, whether it makes the most sense or not. But it's interesting that Taylor reacts the way she does, although for the umpteenth time, she is only 17. And so it's like me, Lee, I'm not even that effective, by myself. So, but she's got a lot of the good skills for it. And oftentimes it can be freeing to someone like Gru to have some of that taken off, all that responsibility taken off their shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, all right, now I don't always have to remember to do all this other stuff. Somebody can just kind of point me in the right direction and I'll go get it done. Some people like direction more and makes sense more. And especially in Gru's state, he'd feel a lot more comfortable if somebody said, yes, that person is okay to take out, go do it, rather than, oh, I don't know. And, kind of racked by questions. So.
All right. We will see what happens with that, if that actually does become a thing. Skitter and Ballistic head out. They make their way toward the Leviathan, or Lake Leviathan. I don't think they actually name it in the story. Anyway, the crater left over by Leviathan, and make their way around to Dolltown. During which that trip, Skitter tries her best, tries to use several different avenues to engage with Ballistic to try to flesh out his feelings on his relationship with Trickster in particular and his team in general. And that's where we find out how unhappy he is with the situation the travelers are in. We acknowledge that the Skitter wasn't really, she did the best she could and wasn't really successful in trying to glean any information from him. And Ballistic recognizes what she's doing and is like, yeah, screw you. I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm just in this for me. As you said, he recognizes, the world's going to end in a couple of years. I'm just going to look out for number one right now. And you should quit trying to worm your way into turning me into some kind of spy against my team.
Yeah, it's, as you said, Taylor has a really hard time reading this situation.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I remember thinking, even the first time in my first read, when I was getting to this point, I was like, God, stop. He knows, he's figured it out. Stop. And as I was prepping for this and I was recalling that situation, my thought process, I realized that this was another case of Wildbow, a good bit of writing from him causing me to see that for what it was and be like, no, Skitter, shush, stop. He gets it. He's not going to turn.
And the problem is that Skitter has had quite a bit of luck convincing people of things or getting people to change their mind or see a different perspective. But she's dealing with somebody who's got these secrets, or at least things in some cases he hasn't voiced out loud, but he's got this underlying principle of, I'm going to finish what I started, and I'm going to be loyal to the people. I'm going to ride the horse I came in on. So, and, I think Taylor underestimates the strength of those convictions. And, I'm guessing this isn't the first time that Ballistic's been approached this way, because Coyle, I mean, that's his gig, right? He's always probing people and trying to find out stuff. And
that's true.
Jack Slash was the same way. And so I'm guessing that a lot of people are looking for those micro gestures or body language type stuff, trying to suss out things from people, and he's just, he clicks on it pretty quick, and it's almost like he's toying with her, like she ever figured out that I'm not giving in, but he finally has to just hit her over the head with it.
So after seeing how definitive Ballistic was in rebuffing her efforts to connect with them, Skitter says, hey, you know what? Why don't I go over here? Why don't we move into separate directions now as we get ready to assault Doll Town, just so that I'm not in your way, and we don't inadvertently have something bad happen to either one of us. Once she realizes that ballistic's not going to turn, Skitter starts sending out her bugs to send a message to Parian, and she meets up with Parian and makes her an offer. And Parian, this is strike two. She doesn't want to join the Undersiders. That was Skitter's big entree to her. Hey, we'll give you some money. Maybe we can get some medical attention for your loved ones who were damaged by the Nine. All you have to do is be a tacit member of our group, the Undersiders, and Parian's not in for that. And as we move toward the end of the chapter, there, Skitter gets attacked by Flechette. I know I threw a lot there. Why don't you comment on that whole section there? The conversation with Parian and that surprise attack from Flechette.
Well, Parian's been through, I don't know that you can say it's worse than what other people have been through, but because she wasn't, flayed and spread out on a wall, but her family was disfigured and manipulated and used as pawns in this sick game of the slaughterhouse, and she's trying to just keep things together with them. And so she's got the same kind of horrible stuff going on in her mind, I'm sure, that Gru has, and is just trying to get through things, and probably distrusts everybody. And so, Taylor is just thinking again of, people want to be in a better situation, and I've got a way to help, and not realizing that there's just no trust there, no common ground for them to start on. There's no trust there at all. So Parian is just like, yeah, forget it. And then Skitter, yeah, she kind of is a little bit too big for her britches. She's like, oh, I'm sensing this person sneaking up behind me, and it's just somebody with a knife, and it won't work. And oh, wait, it's another parahuman. And, oh, that will work.
Right. Yeah. Surprise. As it says here, the person behind me stepped closer. I turned around to keep an eye on her, and she lunged at the same instant. 3 spikes of metal were sticking out from between her fingers like improvised brass knuckles. When she punched them into my shoulder, they went straight through my costume, piercing the bone as though they were hot knives and I were nothing but butter. We have an idea, if we go back to the post-Leviathan arcs, we have an idea of how Flechette's power works and how she uses it to climb walls, and how she infuses the weapons from her crossbow, or she's using an arbalist, I forget. Anyway, she infuses her power into her weaponry so that it will fuse into whatever item it comes into contact with. Just imagine the surprise in Skitter's mind when she has these things go through her costume and into her shoulder. Ugh.
Yeah, and it's almost like the surprise it overrides the pain.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, and I could totally relate to that. I remember when I was a kid doing stuff that I wasn't supposed to do, and I broke through a sliding glass door.
Ooh.
And my first thought was just, oh my gosh, my dad's going to kill me. And then I looked down and I saw that I had totally flayed my hand open. It was like, ow, that hurts pretty bad. But my first thought was just,
of course.
Oh no.
Of course.
So, the same way. So I think this is a great way that Wildbow wrote this, that it's just that surprise and shock of, oh, heck no, this didn't just happen. And then it's like, oh, you know what? That stings a little bit.
And I'm guessing that that pain will come during chapter 6. So as we wind this thing up for this episode, we end with Flechette saying, the lady said no. Flechette told me, pardon me, let me try that again. The lady said no, Flechette told me, one hand holding me down, the other hand raised to strike me again. And that's where we're going to leave Skitter for this episode there. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I guess just this is, the continuing saga of Taylor learning her limitations.
Yeah.
It's looking like Coyle's not going to get a chance to kill her at this point.
Yeah, it may be taken care of. We shall see what we shall see.
Or her arrival might be slightly delayed. She might miss her flight to Washington, D.C. So
yeah. And that brings us to the end of part 2, folks. In part 3, we will cover chapters 6 through 8. Thanks for being here once again, everyone. Please join us for next time as Andy discovers what Wildbow has in store for our team. Keep the questions coming, and until next time, take care.
As Keith said, it's great to get the different perspectives from our loyal listeners. I really appreciate that. That's why Keith and I started doing this, was just to kick around a great story and think about it and turn it around from different angles. You guys are really, gals are really helping to facilitate that. So thanks so much, and looking forward to seeing what you come up with for next episode. Take care.
Thanks for joining us in this video. We hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we hope you'll return. Music is by the band YYNOT from their self-titled debut CD. You can find more information in the link down below. Catch you later.